Hello, everyone. Happy Friday. Welcome back to another episode of Let's Be Honest with Leo and Luna. Hello. Here at Lotus Path Holistics, I am a past life therapist and energy reader. I'm also a spiritual educator, so I do these podcasts and lives to help educate the community and also educate people who need it. How about you?
So my name is Luna, and I'm a Karmic Resolution Facilitator, and this means that I work with trauma, limiting beliefs, and learn patterns across lifetimes.
Yes. So today we're going to be talking about trauma. Trauma itself is defined as sort of like the emotional response to having traumatic events in your life. This is a lot of what psychology talks about in terms of trauma. But when I definitely was researching trauma over the years and understanding it, I guess I really wasn't satisfied with how it was portrayed because I feel like there's so much deeper feelings towards trauma. There's so much more about trauma that needs to be explored in our world. And this is definitely one of the reasons why I want to tackle trauma, because as past life therapists, both of us explore past lives in our unique ways. And past life therapy, or any therapy in general, when you want to fix someone and you want to help them, you want to heal them, you usually have to face somebody's trauma. So past life therapy is usually comparable to trauma therapy and trauma-focused therapies. And we want to show you through our experience how to actually help that, how to help trauma and help overcome it, because sometimes we just all need some help and some perspective. That's what we're going to give to you.
Yeah, and so when it comes to karmic resolution, we're talking about trauma that has been accumulated from one lifetime to the next. And right now in our current lifetime, this trauma reflects. And so we also want to show you, apart from regressing your past lives and remembering how trauma has affected this lifetime and your experience on this in this incarnation, right? We also want to show you how also you can access the root of it for the first time that actually this trauma happened. And we'll try to address quite a lot of that today.
Yes. So yes, welcome all. So speaking about trauma, in our experience, we've seen a lot of it, past and present life. And so in my years of experience, and yours as well, we had this conversation about trauma. And it's the understanding that trauma itself is emotional scarring on the mind, body, soul, spirit. Trauma, in my experience, is not a response to traumatic events. Trauma is an emotional thing that happens. It is an emotional happening to your soul, and trauma is permanent, just like any other memory. And so from how I understand it while exploring past lives, trauma itself is when you have a memory that's so horrific and shocking and hard to swallow. That memory sticks within you. And if it's very, very shocking and very, very powerful memory, it'll stick with you and almost like cause this negative reaction in your soul that actually pulls energy in. And trauma is that tangle of energy inside of your soul. And that's how I've seen it over the years.
So from my experience, this lifetime where I have dealt with quite a lot of trauma since my childhood until some years ago. And so I also was reading articles about how trauma is considered to be a response, an emotional response. But honestly, what it is if you think about it, so imagine now in your physical body, right? So when you have, let's say, an accident, so let's say you bumped on your bed or on your chair, on a table, right? And so you might see a little scar. Your body reacts to the bump, correct? But the bruise is a whole different story. Because when we're talking about the reaction of your body and it creates a scar, but it is just more than just that. So it is more than just the bruising, because we're talking about, mental confusion when you bump and it's like, what did I do really? How do I bump on it? And then the emotional reaction, you might cry if you just bump too hard. And then perhaps if you scar yourself a lot, you just have, to do antibiotic ointment on it. And so there's quite a little process that you try to do to take care of it. But now imagine though, when we're talking about trauma that has to do with our emotional, mental, and spiritual state. So it is not just a reaction. We're talking about an imprint. Because think about it. Let's say, I know that Leo cooks a lot. and so, when he cooks, sometimes he burns himself. And he still has scars from almost like 5 years ago. So these scars, it's definitely not a reaction anymore. It has been imprinted into his skin, so you can just still see that. Or, from the past, when I had a cat, when I was a teenager, he scratched me when he was like a kitten. And some of the scratches were really deep, and I still have them on my skin. And so this is definitely not a reaction of my skin, because someone should be healing, right? But it is an imprint. And so imagine that imprint on your soul as well.
Absolutely. I mean, because it shows on the physical body.
Right.
It shows on the spiritual, emotional, mental body. It's the same. And throughout those different parts of your life, you will have the same scarring, the same energy happen to you. Yeah. So it is definitely something we're interested in talking to you guys about. And let us know if you have any questions during and after this live. And we'd be happy to answer. So, as a clairvoyant practitioner, it's been quite interesting looking at trauma from that perspective, because I started to understand that trauma actually is emotional scarring. It is energetic, and it's all energy, no matter how we look at it. But then applying it to psychology as well, understanding trauma, there are 3 types of trauma, 3 intensities of trauma, 3 ways that they actually impact you. And that is acute, chronic, and complex trauma. So acute trauma is actually when there's just a single thing that happens to you, one thing that causes trauma that you have to deal with. And chronic trauma is when that thing repeats itself over and over again. And then when you have complex trauma, it's when you have multiple traumatic events that actually stack onto one another. And then they start to cause like trauma in between the traumas, where it's like, your mom dies, and then your dad dies, and then your sister dies, and your father dies, and then your grandfather, and then everyone just starts to pass away. They become traumatic events that stack onto one another. So that's sort of like complex trauma. So we're going to analyze that in all 4 ways of understanding trauma. And it's going to give us a lot of perspective actually on how to deal with that, because there's different levels of trauma. I mean, from my perspective, when I deal with someone and I read them and I help them through their traumas, it's hard to get to what that trauma is all about, because you have to understand how intense it really is. So when I feel trauma in somebody's aura, right, or in their chakras, or I see something from a past life or present life, or I start to feel things that come up in this lifetime, it definitely comes off as very, very intense. So when you see it, you can feel it very, very intensely. It's like you feel this rush of energy that comes right at you. And it's like, just like this when it comes to very, very traumatic experiences. They're not like all the other memories. They are definitely more powerful because they have this huge umbrella of energy that actually falls into your aura. And then it causes things to fall apart inside the aura. So we're going to analyze that, definitely. Examples of acute trauma, chronic and complex, include all of the above. Anything that you go through, even falling down the stairs is traumatic sometimes.
Leo, can I use this as an example again?
Sure.
When you're cooking, okay?
Oh, God.
I mean, I'm just trying to explain it, yes, I like doing that, by the way, explaining on a very, very simple and understanding way of how trauma manifests in our daily life. And so let's say Leo again, right? So he's cooking. And then let's say he's boiling an egg, and then all of a sudden for some reason the water spills, right? And just you just get a tiny burn, but then it never happens ever again. So that's acute trauma. Mm-hmm. Chronic trauma, you go to a situation where every single time that Leo boils the egg, somehow the water spills. So when they start repeating itself, this is what I feel the problem starts, because the chronic trauma can turn to complex trauma. Because when Leo starts cooking, right, and then he keeps getting burned from the water from the boiled eggs, so the pattern starts with fear. So he's scared to go cook because he's like, well, what if I try to fry something and something, spills with the oil? And then it happens because, of the fear, we manifest it. So he's being a little clumsy. So now from boiling the egg, we're going him frying potatoes, and then the fries or the oil jumps and burns him. And then he's like, okay. So he puts food in the oven. Next day, he gets burned. So that creates a complex trauma. And imagine now his fear, his frustration to go back to the kitchen and cook because he keeps having accidents, right? So imagine that now on a mental and emotional level. And also imagine that from one lifetime to the next. How many times does Leo have to burn himself? To come right now. So, for example, this is why you will see many, many people living with unexplained fear. So let's say that Leo, for example, this lifetime, he wouldn't want to cook. He was like, I'm avoiding that kitchen. I don't care. What are you going to do? You cook. I'm not doing it. And so we try to understand what is happening, and this lifetime won't give you any results, because they will try to figure out, the first thing they would do, they would just try to do inner child trauma, maybe something happened in the childhood. But if there's nothing to be found there, so what is next? After inner child, so you would just perhaps some shadow work, or you witness someone happening to them, and still not enough. So the last result that you have while Leo is scared to cook, right? It is that it has happened so many times in his past lives, to the point that we come this lifetime with a complex trauma. He doesn't want to deal with the kitchen. Or if he deals with the kitchen, he has all these accidents. He's like, well, this gets quite traumatic. I'm done with it. So that's the complex trauma. Now, if we get it to an emotional state, so let's say that we take it on a relationship state, right? And let's say that acute trauma, that would be having a bad relationship, and that's it, and it just happened. Maybe you had a bad date. So the chronic trauma is keep having bad dates over and over again. And so once you start repeating that pattern, then you start manifesting in other areas in your life.
Hey there.
And so that could just definitely mean that, let's say that there is that question about self-worth. What exactly am I attracting? Why do I keep attracting these people? And then from the romantic sense, then you start seeing friends. So it goes to a different area. And this is where I would just say another area comes in and creates the complex trauma.
Yes.
And
yeah, we'll definitely get to that when we get to this part right here.
Yep.
So it's true that the way that it works is that, when you go through traumatic events in your life, they start to just sort of domino effect into another. And then with past lives as well, that's the same, because we all have our own past lives, right? And they repeat in this lifetime. So this is why when you have different friends in different places, it feels like when you go to school and you go to work and then you come home, all these things seem to just be on your shoulders and get really, really heavy. The reason that is because all sort of different traumas are interlinked into your subconscious mind and past lives, and that's how they work. So it's quite interesting to look at it that way. So definitely from my perspective, I feel like when I see trauma and I see things that happen in people's lives where they're really harsh, it feels like everything just gets sucked into it. Mm-hmm. And you'll find this in your life where you'll go through very traumatic experiences, like losing a pet or something like that. And when you go through that then becomes this all-encompassing thing that it triggers you in a way that no matter what pet or animal you're around, you feel this loss inside of you, and it gets really tough. Hey, Christina.
Hi.
So it's definitely something like that. So let's talk about the 4 pillars. So I posted a new article called The 4 Pillars of Health and Wellness. We did attach the pillars to love and relationships last month for Valentine's Day. Hello. And it was interesting, and I wanted to get more in depth into it and understand that there are 4 aspects to life based on, esoteric understandings, which is our physical, mental, and emotional and spiritual life. So, through this process, I've studied trauma, and the way that I help people is I help them understand that trauma is organized by those 4 types of relationships and problems that we have. So if you yourself are going through trauma, right, whether it's losing a loved one, or if you've been abused or anything like that, we're going to go throughout the list to explain to you what these types of traumas are and how they're separate, because I think that it's very easy to get these misunderstood, and also trauma blends. Like it blends. So like if you go through something in one part of the house, it blends into everything in the entire house, if that makes sense. So let's talk about those traumas. So physical trauma itself is defined as like physical abuse, sexual abuse, you having to leave your home, being evicted, divorces in the family. And those things are physical traumas because they mess with your root. They're very earth element connected to, the way that you are and your stability. And those physical traumas can really, really mess with your foundation in life. And then you got your mental traumas. Your mental traumas are all about the mind. And they are when it comes to abuse, it's when you have to watch abuse, or when you see something that is very, very traumatic and very, very horrific, you have to watch something very bad. And also when people are, trying to tell you lies and make rules against you and all these logical oppressions in your life. Then you have your emotional traumas, which is like in abuse, it's like almost like being fooled into thinking that abuse is normal. When people go through emotional trauma and emotional abuse, it's complicated because, we associate emotions with feelings, but emotional abuse is when somebody's emotions is swayed to believe in the abuse and to understand the abuse and to empathize with the abuse. And it gets into neglect and grief over loss. That's the type of emotional abuse and emotional traumas. Now, spiritual trauma is something that I definitely want to speak with you guys about. Spiritual trauma and spiritual abuse it's about the soul. It's about the spirit. It's about the 4th pillar, which is your passions and goals in life. It is about you as a person. So when you go through spiritual traumas, we're talking about when things get so bad that you're self-destructing or you're becoming the abuser yourself. When you abuse others or abuse yourself, it's spiritual trauma because we're getting to a point where you're starting to feel things in your soul and it hurts a lot and it touches everything. So also spiritual traumas deal with relationship traumas. Because that's why when you fall in love and someone breaks your heart, you feel like, oh, I can't live anymore. It's different. Like when somebody punches you on the street, you're like, I am physically traumatized. But when somebody breaks your heart, you're like, oh, life is over. The reason that is because it's a spiritual trauma, because it's so close to your soul. It has to deal with you and your self-worth. It has to deal with who you are as a person being disrespected as an entire individual, as an entire being. So that's how I define spiritual trauma. And then, tell me about you. Like, is there anything that you saw? And also what you feel spiritual trauma is so that we get all those perspectives.
Right. So from my experience, living with trauma for almost 30 years of my life, right? There is a lot to it because usually it starts with the physical. It is easy, to just like slap someone or just push someone or just... Sometimes you don't even think about it. It is as if, let's say, a reaction.
Yeah.
And so after that, once it happens once, then he starts working in the abuser in his mind. So once they did it once, they start thinking about it, they start feeling it. So it's like, it feels right. It's exactly what I want. But then this is how it impacted me as well, because the physical trauma started getting emotional trauma because I couldn't trust my stepfamily after being physically abused. And so I was crying all the time. I was feeling depressed. Sometimes I was feeling even emotionless. I didn't want to feel emotion because it was too much. Yeah. And then the mental trauma, I always had in my head the worst case scenario. And so I was thinking, when is the next time that this physical abuse is going to happen? And hi, Colleen. And so that was the next part. And the spiritual part was when I lost my, I would just say my excitement and my passion for my spiritual path, because I was trying to survive. And then we go back to the physical trauma. It was so bad that I was trying to make sure that I'm physically safe before I even think about how to serve others and how to help others. That went out of the door. Yeah. And so when the physical, mental, and emotional had its cycle, the spiritual was out of the door. And this was because I didn't even want to touch the fact that trauma, spiritually wise, was coming from past lives. Because, I mean, if you can imagine a traumatic situation that happened to your life again and again, let's say some people like maybe for a year, some other people for years, many years, right? Now imagine this situation having happened, let's say 100 lifetimes that you've lived over and over again. So that spiritual trauma is so much to the point that you don't even want to access it because it hurts. Mm-hmm. Like, how many times do you need to access memories that you keep seeing being hurt?
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, so let's explain. So from our perspectives, we're both past life therapists, right? We've done this for a long time. And we've encountered trauma, so even our own trauma. Like, when I have to solve things, the only reason that I'm able to see past lives is because I solved my own trauma. You can't see past lives unless you actually focus on all the things that get in your way. And unfortunately, when us as spiritual people, and all of you who are watching now, you have these spiritual gifts. And you're going to find that what gets in the way of your spiritual gifts is your trauma. And it's also the things that hurt. And it's a lot. I mean, the thing is, a lot of people always want to be told the good things. And they want to be told the lovely things. But that's not really what causes change. It's really when you actually face something that hurts that you can actually bring real healing. And this is something that we've experienced for so long, over 10 years of that, where we've been part of like psychic communities and spiritual communities where there's a lot of people who want to just tell people what they want to hear. And want to tell people, you know, you're loved and love and light, which is great. But when it comes to true spiritual progression, we have to get past all the dark things that are in the shadows. Otherwise, we can't see. So, you know, physically, you can move on and you can heal and, you know, go to the doctor. Mentally, you can just, you know, get your head straight, maybe ignore things. And emotionally, it's hard, but you work through it and you just fill your life with other emotional things. But when you're talking about your spiritual trauma, we're talking about how you really feel inside about yourself, your sense of self-worth. When you don't deal with how you feel spiritually inside, spirituality isn't all, you know, ghosts and spirits and tarot cards. No. Spirituality, as I explained in my article that I posted, and it's on my website, it's about your sense of connecting to everything, to the higher power of whatever that is. Spirituality is also the sense of self. It's your sense of who you are and all that. So as spiritual people, we have to take that into account. We have to know that our spirituality is multifaceted. It is not only part of us and part of our greater being, but our spirituality has to be, well, what's the better word? Protected, nurtured. And though, you know, going to sound healing and doing yoga are very spiritually beneficial, when you close your eyes and you can't see, you know, the spirits that you want to see, or you can't feel your intuition sometimes, I could almost most of the time guarantee that that's because there are very, very dark traumas in this life or past lives that get in the way. And then you can't see because it covers up your eye, because your third eye is not only just your way of seeing the world, but it's also connected to the chakra system because it's all one thing. And that itself is based on emotions. And if you have emotional things that you don't want to remember, especially when you're in your childhood, it gets in your way. So therefore, the understanding of spiritual trauma, we all go through it, but we don't understand we're going through it. And this is why we want to educate you on spiritual trauma, because for instance, spiritual trauma is when someone disrespects your whole life, you know, for many, many, many years, and you have a very low self-esteem. Spiritual trauma. because emotional is when, you're actually going through things that leave you feeling connected and disconnected. But when you're going through spiritual pain, that's when you as a person is suffering because of the things that you're going through. That's spiritual trauma. And then that's why, when we do, like I do a bunch of healing in different ways, because it is my idea, it's my belief that spirituality isn't enough to heal anybody, because it's only one part of like at least a 4-part system. What about the physical, mental, emotional? You have to touch all those things in order to be, holistically healed. And that's my version of spiritual trauma. And it's also the understanding to me that spiritual trauma is about the soul. Everything's about the soul. So therefore, your spiritual trauma sits at the center, like here. And then, I can't do it. It's like at the center. Okay, here. Okay, you have all your traumas here. You got your mental, emotional, physical, and then spiritual's right there in the center. Everything revolves around your spiritual trauma. So if you guys also have experiences where you feel that that's true for you as well, feel free to let us know. And if you have questions about spiritual trauma, we're here to answer them during or after this live, because it's a different perspective, and it's important to know, because we all go through it. We just don't know.
Another thing that I would like to mention is when it comes to spiritual trauma, have you heard how many people say out there, I don't know what my soul purpose is. I don't know what I'm here to do. What am I here in this world to do? Maybe, I don't know, maybe just like have a job, pay my bills, and just be okay with my family, and just have fun, enjoy myself, and maybe that's it. And so even if you overcome the physical, mental, and emotional trauma to a point, the spiritual trauma is lingering, because at the end of the day, even if you address everything else, you really need to access who you really are, and you need to access your gifts. You need to access your soul purpose. You need to access what you're really here to do as a person. What is your soul mission? And I feel that there are so many people out there who cannot access that, and this is the main reason as to why the spiritual trauma it is also related to physical, mental, and emotional trauma across lifetimes. And so this, as we talked earlier, it creates chronic trauma and complex trauma across lifetimes. Now imagine having to deal with the physical, mental, and emotional trauma all over again. And the reason that people ask, so why does this happen? Why do I have to repeat it? It is because the lesson hasn't been learned. It kind of like, think of this lifetime. Let's say that, maybe stay for a long time in a job, right? Let's say, it's just for 6 months maybe. And every 6 months you job hop. And it's kind of like a pattern. You don't really pay attention to it. Maybe you're like, maybe I'm not meant for that job. Maybe I'm meant to do something else. And so when this is happening, when you job hop, right? And then you're trying to understand why, it is because there's some physical, mental, and emotional trauma happening. This needs to be addressed so to stop repeating the pattern. Now imagine this situation happening across lifetimes. And so if this doesn't get resolved, you will keep job hopping, if that makes sense. Once you address the trauma, you finally find a job that is fulfilling to you. Yeah. And so the same happens with past lives. If you haven't addressed the problem, it's still there. It doesn't go anywhere. I will just tell you that. It just sits around and till you acknowledge it and fix it. 100%.
Yeah, 100%. It's true. And that's just how this lifetime goes too. If there are things in your past as a child, if you went through any abuses, which at some point we all have, it's like you can't really ignore those things because they will come back to haunt you, unfortunately, in this world. So it's important that we face them and face them head on, for sure. So let's talk about, so those are the 4 types of traumas based on the 4 pillars. And I want to talk to you about now, beyond spiritual trauma, understanding the healing methods that come with overcoming trauma. How to actually focus on the healing methods with trauma. And we'll understand that together in that way. So the first one, when it comes to the physical traumas that we go through, which include our physical abuses, losing our foundations, losing everything all at once. We want to focus on healing safety and security. We have to focus on reaching security. So when you go through physical abuse, it's not if your parents beat you up, if there was sexual abuse in your life, you want to be able to do things to bring safety back to your life. And this includes martial arts, maybe gardening, feng shui, and then also, sexual healing of the physical kind where you do it by yourself and just things like that. And we're here to suggest any methods that you guys need. I know that a lot of people experience physical trauma throughout their life, whether it's somebody, you love who hit you, or, sexual things that happen that you don't want to talk about. I know this is a very taboo topic, but we're here to open that floodgates for you guys. If you guys want to discuss and you need any advice on those things, we're here to give that. Because understanding our perspective from past lives, things repeat themselves. So it's okay, and you don't have to be ashamed, because trauma is everything that we go through. Yes, please. That's true. Heal. So let's talk about healing that physical trauma, the physical pillar of life. We both took up martial arts, actually.
Yep.
Because we went through a lot of similar things, but I was in Hapkido, which is like a physical and spiritual version of karate, but it's Korean. And what kind of martial arts?
I did Kung Fu for 11 years. Mm-hmm.
11 years?
Yeah. That's a long time.
Yeah, so physical exercise and martial arts, it gave me specifically the power to, I just know that, bullies are never going to get against me, and that I have power in my life again, that I needed to get busy because I didn't want to continue to be abused by anyone. And so physical exercise through martial arts actually gave me the power. It made me feel safe and secure. A lot of people I know, they do that. They'll take up Krav Maga, or they'll just they'll take up Taekwondo. Sometimes taking up a physical exercise or a self-defense technique actually makes you feel safe after being physically abused. So it's something that I've been through, and it did help. It gave me a better sense of reasons why I don't want to hurt anyone in life, but it's hard, very hard. Yeah, and how about your years?
Well, apart from that, what helped me a lot was having a physical routine where I take care of myself. Because when your body is being abused in different ways, right? Mm-hmm. So you come to a point where you can't even look at yourself in the mirror. I had that problem where I would just pass by the mirror and I didn't want to look. I was like, and Leo knows the point. I even had problems with taking photos or being in front of the camera. And that was part of the experience where I was not feeling comfortable in my own skin. And this happens with the abuse. And so what you really helped me with this process was to create a self-care routine. So once a week, I decided, to have a bubble bath, to do a hair mask, to do a face mask, apart from everything else. So taking care of your body shows the self-love that you actually care about that part of yourself that was being neglected by everyone else. And so you gain that, I would just say, self-confidence, and you slowly start caring for your body when no one else did before. It is very difficult. I feel like the physical aspect, it is very difficult, especially if you have been bullied at school. So let's say if someone said, oh my God, let's say your nose is terrible, or something about your weight, or you're so short. For me, they used to say all the time, you're so short. And I had a problem with my height. I'm not that short, but I don't know, I guess people consider me short. And so, to a point, I was trying to wear heels, but I was a little bit clumsy, so heels were not working for me. So I'm just like, I just need to accept who I am. Exactly. And that was a whole different story where I had to wear clothes that I felt that they flattered me, and I felt comfortable, rather than just try to be taller or try to, I guess, show the abusers, that, look at me, I'm up to your expectations. You don't even need to do that, because the abusers would try to do it.
That's true.
Yep. So this is a very, very good exercise. And yeah, as Leo said, you can just go for martial arts, as I did. You can also maybe Tai Chi, Qigong, so anything that helps your body move. Yoga helps a lot with gaining,
a sense of physical security.
Because you're the one who takes care of the body. You're the one who feels in control. That's very, very important to say.
Oh, that's true. 100%. So yeah, if you have been through physical abuses, those are the types of things you want to focus on, because you could even do gardening because you're focusing on like that earth element type of energy. Gardening, though it seems very soft and feminine, it really helps you make like this big sense of safety just come up. It's like blooming all of it out of, the root of who you are. So gardening is this weird, strange thing. And if you feel unsafe in your home, try some feng shui, try orienting things in the house that make you feel better. And sometimes just put extra locks on your door if that's how it makes you feel safe. But whatever, focus on getting that security, because I do find a lot of people when they've been through physical abuses, they don't take those steps because they're scared to. So if you actually want to gather physical strength with along those physical abuses, you definitely want to focus on those things. For sure.
Oh, another thing I would like to mention, for those people who have went to extremes, I have connected with a couple people who have that, where they are scared of their life and they're scared that the abuse is going to come back. Physical part, your safety, call the police, just call a friend, just call someone, ask for help. It's very, very important because you feel safe.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, even asking for help here, and asking for help after. If you want to private message us and ask for guidance, that's fine. Like, we're willing to give you the advice that you need to move along the way, so don't be afraid.
Yeah.
And so the second one is the mental abuse. Again, we're talking about just seeing or hearing very horrific things, being fooled, being lied to, and somebody using their logic or rules against you that make you feel like you're insane, like you're crazy, messing with your head. With mental abuse, what you want to focus on is clarity. You want to focus on getting clear with your life and finding truth. So journaling and telling your story through these experiences, maybe making, a few videos of your own just to tell your story, to tell people, writing a book. Getting out there and actually telling your story does help your mental state so you can start to organize your thoughts. The things that we do actually do get organized in thought processes. So you want to definitely take care of that. If you've been through a mental abuse and someone's just been messing with your head throughout your life. Something also that helps with mental abuse is getting away from home. Vacationing a little bit. Just getting out, going to a friend's house sometimes, not being in the place that triggers you so often. That's something that helps with mental abuse a lot. So if you've ever gone through that, or you still go through mental abuse from people that you care about, and they try to really mess with your head and make you think things that are not true, well, you're not alone. But in order to heal this, you're going to have to start focusing on bringing clarity into your life. It is super important that you clarify your thoughts. Even clarifying your trauma is important. So writing down all the things that's very traumatic in your life, boom, you're actually, feeding into the healing process by doing that. So that's something to focus on, and that's my super best advice when it comes to mental abuse. Mental abuse is weird. You see a lot of it in relationships as well, especially, or friendships. But when you go through those things, just take care of that in that way.
The difficult part with mental abuse is that you lose your sense of what is true and what is not true. And so when you start questioning yourself, does that other person say the truth? Or what's my truth in all that? Or especially with gaslighting, right? It is like one of the most common, I would just say, mental abuse. And so with all the frustration, I would just totally and highly suggest don't engage into conversations with the other person who tries to mess up with your head, because that's exactly what they want you to do. So take that time away from them. Even if you cannot physically leave the place that you're in, at least take time, perhaps in your own room, or go outside, as Leo said, maybe go to nature, or maybe go out with a friend for coffee and just talk about it. And through talking, the truth will come out itself. And so you will start comparing what was being said and what the truth is. For example, if, especially a lot happen with cyberbullying and even bullying at school, even
100%.
if it's not physical and it's just mental things that they say to you and then you believe it. So you look at yourself in your mirror and you say, oh, maybe that's who I am. Maybe this is what it is. So do not allow that to become your reality. So take the time and even write it down, journal it, as Leo said, talk with a friend, just clear the air and make sure that you're in your thoughts and not allowing anyone else to change what you think about yourself.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I believe that when it comes to mental abuse, you know, we really have to focus on the fact that mental abuse is sort of hidden. You don't really see it. It's kind of like spiritual abuse. Like physical and emotional abuse, very common, very obvious when it happens, but mental abuse is like this hidden thing where you'd never know it's really happening until you realize somebody's lying to you.
Yep.
You know, when somebody tells you that the sky is purple, you know, and has you believe that for 30 years or something, that's mental abuse because you're basically hindering somebody's growth, you know? So there's definitely different types of mental abuse. Don't be afraid to question if mental abuse happened in your life. And, feel free to let anyone know, you know, definitely be honest, be vocal. That's what the mental pillar is about. Definitely. So the third pillar and the third type of trauma is actually emotional trauma. And emotional trauma is all the abuse, neglect, loss, any sort of types of emotions that you go through. And we definitely want to focus on that next. All right, Christina says, let me try to open this up. It's hard when you're a small person, so avoiding violence and to see it's the karma of the attacker rather than know that they have the upper hand to dominate. I so want clarity to mental abuse. Another, in fact, all four, I think applies to me. Reliving the trauma because being called names and people standing over you again. I find seclusion helps. Peace of mind, being told you're not good enough, or false hope. Wow, that hurts. Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing, Christina. That's actually the part of understanding about healing from trauma is being vulnerable. So the fact that you're vulnerable about it means you're ready for healing, and you're probably better off than a lot of people because you're very vocal about it. So congratulations on that.
Sure. Thank you so much for sharing your experience. As I'm reading these little sentences that you wrote, as you see, physical, emotional, spiritual, mental trauma, they're all interconnected, and they affect you. So once you realize one thing, then once your physical security is not there, and then you start realizing things and you start being scared. So the mental is there, and then emotional, maybe you start crying and you're being frustrated. You don't know what to do. And that sometimes the emotions and the thoughts, they're being blended together. So your thoughts are not clear because of your emotions, and your emotions are not clear because of your thoughts. So fear is hopping back and forth, and then you lose yourself in the process. And there goes the spiritual abuse into all that.
Oh, of course. So the way that trauma works is it's a big bundle of mess, really, in our lives. But the reason that I'm separating it into 4 categories is because that's sort of how it goes. And when it comes to trauma, it's kind of like when you pay your bills, really. You separate the bills into separate envelopes to pay from the same bank. Does that make sense? So that's the way the trauma goes is, you know, when you go through traumatic experiences and abuse, people are pulling out of your bank. It comes from the same bank, but it goes in different ways, different companies. And think of the 4 pillars of that trauma as actually 4 types of companies that just keep taking your soul energy, keep taking your worth, and that abuser keeps taking who you are. So by implementing this idea where you can actually separate and organize trauma in categories and then heal those categories and understand that once you heal them, you throw them back in the bank. You throw them back in who you are and you ravel it back to where it belongs. It helps you because there's a difference between, you know, heart trauma and lung trauma. It's the same body, but different actions as reactions. So that's the way the different types of traumas work. So specifically, you had mentioned a mental trauma and then how that works and what people say. Yeah, I mean, we're going to definitely in the future talk about triggers because we have so much to say.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, so much to say about the way triggers work, because there's PTSD, there's depression, there's triggers, and how to deal with those things. These things deserve time because we want to be able to give you the full scope of how to heal from these things. This itself is exactly what you did, which is great, Christina. It's about understanding the trauma that's there. And it's funny that you had mentioned, because she had first mentioned mental trauma. And that means that you're mentally on that level where you're intelligent enough to know exactly what you're going through and how that hurts. But I can honestly say that, from that feeling and from those experiences, what you want to do if your abuse starts from the mental and things that you were told and being mentally and verbally abused, because verbal abuse is like mental abuse, first. So then what you want to do is what you did here, which is write down your story. Maybe create an entire journal, book of your story, and tell it. You might not tell your family members. You might be hiding this from your mom and your dad. I mean, that's normal. There's lots of things that I hid from my parents all the time. I sometimes think that my parents even know me because I have so many secrets.
I hope your dad is not watching.
I know. Don't watch. Turn off the Facebook. But the thing is, I myself had missed the point that, abuse is not when you're alone. It's when you understand that it's the hard times that you go through, and then you have to pull in people that you care about so that you could work through it, So when it starts with mental abuse, when it's all about the way people talk to you and abuse you and make you feel very specific ways about the things that they say. We've all been through that, especially as kids.
Right.
Because the things that we hear, the best way to go about it is not only to tell your story, but to also have time away. So I think you're definitely right with that. Having that seclusion time, it really helps with healing from mental abuse, because your head is so clouded. It's so clouded. When you're mentally abused, especially as a kid, let's say you had a bully or you have a parent telling you you're ugly, you're ugly, you're ugly. How you heal from that is you get away from it so you can clear your head, because the head has a limit. It's like this big, but once it's full, it's like, it just gets so much. So you're making the right moves, Christina, where you actually are going to focus on clearing your head, giving yourself space and room to breathe and to tell your story. So I can tell you that you're definitely on the right track. As for healing those things and how, living through them and they hurt and then they bring triggers through your life. Now, that's about actually being able to understand the origins of where they come from. Once you understand those things, you have to start to, mentally, not only talk about it, but replace them with better thoughts and actually your thoughts to heal people. And this really, really helps. So, how like when you go public speaking, you go somewhere and you're talking to, a group of kids like, hey, abuse is not okay and this and that. It really helps the soul. It heals from that mental abuse.
Or even if speaking to, let's say, your kids or your friends, or telling what you went through and how you want them, to move forward. When you speak your truth, you also heal yourself. And it's something that I have experienced myself. Yeah. The moment that I started, I started on my Facebook profile being more vocal and just speaking about what happened in the past and where I am right now. First of all, I see how much I have progressed and how much I have transformed throughout this whole process, right? Mm-hmm. But also, I'm very, very hopeful that my experience and what happened will inspire others to get off their own shadow. So your story will inspire someone else.
That's true. You should try that, Christina, where you can do the same in your way, in your fashion, where you can actually express your truth. I find that that's really helpful. Mental abuse, in my instances of mental abuse that I've been through, the problem is mental abuse is all about communications, because that's what the mental pillar is about. It's about communicating. And when you're quiet about something that happens to you, it's immediately self-abusing to stay quiet about abuse and things that people are saying. It's hard, because I've been there too. But that's what it's about. It's about actually getting to say your truth, say exactly what happened, tell people what's going on. That's exactly how it's about. So definitely, if you have any other questions, we'll definitely be able to answer your questions with the time being. Colleen said, how do we know if the traumas we experience are from past lives or this life? Well, as you would say, easy answer is all of the above. All of the above. So anything you experience in this life has a past life connection, basically.
And it is because, so many people ask that question. They say, so how do I know if the trauma is related this lifetime or past lives? And so the thing is that, when you have experienced trauma in your past lives and it has not been resolved, it reflects in your life right now. And this actually shows your soul journey as a soul, as a person who has traveled, through different lifetimes to learn lessons, to enhance your experience. But through these experiences, you also bring trauma all along. Yeah. And so sometimes, how we say in this lifetime, let's say I had a fight with someone, let's just block, delete them, block, delete, right? Yeah. Well, the block, delete is going to go to the next lifetime because you will have to deal with what you left out in your previous lifetime. And so, so to clearly answer your question is that any trauma that you experience in this lifetime, it has its roots in your past lives. Yeah. And so, another way to acknowledge how this is true, if you try different modalities, let's say you try maybe reflexology, maybe you try yoga, maybe you try to go to a psychologist, maybe you try maybe work with a coach, and then you see that no matter what you try, this pattern is not going away. And so even if it goes away, it will come back. It's kind of like, some people when they go to rehab, and they say, I'm clean right now and I'm in a good state. But after a year or 2 years, they go back to rehab. And it is because the trauma, whatever they went through that made them go to rehab in the first place, it hasn't been fully addressed. And something triggered it, and they had to go back. And so when these triggers happened in your present life, if you have actually done work across lifetimes, and you acknowledge your past lives, you know the triggers, the moment that the trigger happens, you take control of it. So what you do is you say, so now I know why this is happening to me. And once you do, you resolve it. So this is how it would work from your past lives to this lifetime. Does that answer your question?
Yes, so that's true. An easy way to know is exactly like how she said. When the problem is reoccurring and it definitely won't go away, you got a bigger problem. It's the same thing when you go to the doctor. Like, my rash, it keeps coming back. And they give you different remedies, right? And at the end of the day, let's say the solution is just change your diet. No one's going to tell you to change your diet. They keep giving you pills or creams, for the rash to go away. It's something internal then. So that means that, the solution can't be found because the cause is not found. Mm-hmm. You can't, it's just the way it is. So if let's say you run into guys, right? Let's say you're dating men and then the men keep being the same person again and again and again. No matter what you do, by the way. No matter what you do. It's a past life repetition because it won't stop. And you wonder, why does this happen to me? Well, part of it is probably you where you're attracting it. But if you change who you are and you're still attracting it, then that's past life karma that needs to be resolved. It's kind of like the funny thing you say, even if I change country and you're like, okay, I'm going on vacation, I'm just going to meet someone new. And then you meet someone new, it's so exotic. It's like, this is nothing like the person I met. And then it's exactly like the previous people I met. And you're like, but what is going on? Why is this happening again? Yeah. This is how it feels like. Like the question usually that I used to have in the past is, oh my God, it's happening again. How and why? I don't get it. Yeah. There you go. That's when you know past life trauma is happening. And, but they're the same. Essentially, the answer is past and present life trauma are the same. But, not everything needs to be solved with past life regression, but there are things that definitely need past life regression. Otherwise, they take too long. Sometimes without past life regression, you'll have to take 20 years to solve one issue that you could have solved in a day. That's sort of how you push things forward with that type of like quantum healing, So that's what you do with that, for sure. Yes, so yeah, feel free to give us any of your questions before we end the live in about 10 minutes. But let's talk about the last methods of healing and focuses. So the third type of abuse is emotional abuse. And the way to heal that is basically connection. You have to focus on making connections again. Because emotional abuse makes us not want to connect to others. Yes,
you're so very welcome.
Yes, I'm definitely happy to have you. So making those connections for emotional abuse is super important because when we go through emotional abuse, we isolate ourselves in a way that we feel totally neglected. So we neglect ourselves and our self-care and our emotional care. So getting involved in communities is super important when you want to get over emotional abuse. You want to connect with people who are your tribe, who love you, and maybe get involved with your family again if there are people who care. And also just find like-minded people, if that makes sense, and make friends, 100%, make new friends. That's how you heal from emotional abuse, because emotional abuse at the end of the day leaves you neglected and feeling like you have nobody, but you are not alone. So if you ever feel emotionally, tired of that, make connections. Focus on empathy, connecting with others, and don't be afraid. Because, it can be really confused with mental abuse, where it's like you just want to throw everything out of your mind and let it go. Because sometimes I do it too, where it's like something is so strenuous and I just clear my mind. I'm like, it's eventually going to go away, but it comes back. So you have to deal with the emotional traumas. And with that, you get through everything else. And then the last type of trauma is the spiritual trauma, which is the bigger trauma we're trying to discuss and help you guys with. When you go through spiritual trauma, which includes being the abuser or actually being, allowing the abuse to happen to you. So self-abuse, lies, cheating, relationship drama, including just feeling disrespected and worthless with low self-esteem because of what people did. These are spiritual types of abuses, and you have to focus on your purpose. You have to find your purpose. And when you have that focus in mind, it brings you healing because your purpose starts to come to you, you start to attract it into you, like the law of attraction. You want to explore your spirituality. That's very key to healing from spiritual trauma. You want to get educated. So if you got to get back into school or get a certification or take a class or seek education because it'll help you with your self-worth. And then you want to get into art and get creative as well as build self-worth through self-worth practices. You want to be proud of yourself. You want to love yourself. Self-love, healing the inner self and healing your inner child as well, which we're going to talk about next week.
Yep.
And so those are the 4 healing focuses that you need to focus on to start, at least continue, and to finish the healing process from trauma is security, clarity, connection, and purpose. You focus on these things and you allow them to bring you things into your life so that you can finally feel healed. Okay? Self-sabotage or a lack of self-worth, simple things. Absolutely.
Yes, they do. And a last thing that I wanted to mention when it comes to the soul healing after soul trauma, ask yourself, how spirituality can help me heal from that trauma. Yeah. So perhaps you will start inner child healing work. Yeah, seeking purpose. Love that, Christina. Seeking purpose, or perhaps say I'm gonna learn about shadow work. I'm gonna learn about past lives. There's so many modalities out there, and remember, you don't need to do just one. So at least from my experience, I work with technically 3 modalities: shadow work, inner child healing, and karmic resolution. And as I mature and grow in my own path, I always add something more. For example, right now, I also do light codes, and light codes bring healing to the soul through past lives. So this is another method that I have incorporated right now. So this is technically 4 that I do. But the more I seek for myself whatever is left over from my healing, and also how to serve, my clients, and also serve everyone else who needs help right now. I also evolve, and I'm looking to different methods to see how can I incorporate them to what I do to help others with trauma and also myself.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think because it's okay. With the time we have, let's talk about spiritual trauma. Because spiritual trauma is so misunderstood, because spiritual trauma is basically everything. It's the trauma of your soul, the trauma of your true spiritual nature and your self-worth at the end of the day. No matter what abuse you go through, it all leads to your spiritual self-worth. And spirituality is connected to that self-worth. And so healing that spiritual trauma is about finding your purpose. Whenever you go through something traumatic, that's why strong people like us, like you guys, we get up and then we look for that purpose again. We go to temples, we go to churches, we go to seminars, we go to people who care, we go to Facebook lives of our favorite people, or we go to Instagram lives, or we go to YouTube videos. We go to look for things that show us part of who we are and build our self-worth, because we gravitate towards people we're connected to. So like if you gravitate towards us, maybe we connected in a past life.
Yeah, I mean, I always say that.
Yeah.
The fact that you guys are here, it means that you have heard us, giving a little nudge in the past lives, and just moving forward, and it's kind of like a reminder in a sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So healing the purpose and the passion in your life definitely leads to spiritual healing. And spiritual healing is the center focus of all healing. So definitely, if there's anything to take away when you see this live or you see this video afterwards on YouTube, you want to be able to, at the end of the day, focus on the 4 pillars of health, the holistic health and wellness. And those things are the spiritual, physical, mental, and emotional aspects of our life. But spirituality is the center. It is not like a square. It is a triangle. And with a thing in the center, which happens to be spirituality. So you want to focus on that spirituality. Spirituality is everything. It is the foundation of who we are as people.
Yeah.
So understand that. And also, if you yourself have gone through trauma and you want to sort of organize where that came from, you can see my video previous to this. You can watch the beginning of this again and try to organize. Take a piece of paper. Like, let me show you. So take a piece of paper like this and then write down the different traumas. And then start writing your experience down in those traumas. And then when you do that, it actually organizes it for you to heal from this trauma. Then you take our ideas on how to actually focus on healing trauma, and then you write down your solutions right here. And take a note card for yourself and start to heal yourself through acknowledging that when you're consciously aware of a problem, you find the solution. And that's everything that I teach personally, which is conscious awareness. Once you know that you got a problem, you are immediately going to find the solution right around the corner, but you got to know you got the problem. It's like going to the doctor. You get nowhere unless you know the problem.
Yep.
You need to know the diagnosis, otherwise you get nowhere. So spiritually, same thing. Emotionally and mentally, same thing. So that's our best advice on overcoming trauma just on the surface. Organize your trauma. Then defeat your trauma by then applying solutions. And then follow all that sort of advice. And then if you guys go through those processes, reach out to us. Give us feedback on how that worked out for you and if it helped. I hope personally that this helped you guys understand how to overcome trauma, at least open the door. I know
and also how to recognize it. Recognize the 4 pillars,
Oh, yeah.
Where do you stand?
Oh, 100%. 100%. Yes. Oh, you're welcome, Christina.
And thank you for being here.
Yes, definitely. Thank you for being here. And we hope that our light can help you heal and spread that light. Share that knowledge with your friends and your family so that people can heal. Everyone's going through something, and everyone's been through abuse, whether they want to say it or not. So definitely spread that love and light and knowledge, and we'll get through it together, for sure.
Oh, thank you for being here, Colleen. Enjoy your gardening.
Yeah, that's definitely how to build your foundation, as we talked about.
Yep.
So build your security again. Gardening is a really great way to start that. And see you and have a great weekend, everyone.
Yeah, enjoy.
Yeah, see you guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.